From Vermont Public, this is The Frequency. I'm Liam Elder Connors. It's Wednesday, May 21st, and here are today's headlines. Governor Phil Scott signed a tax bill this week that relies on $118 million in surplus money to keep education property taxes nearly flat. Homestead taxes, which is what residents pay on their primary home, vary from town to town depending on local spending. But this legislation should hold the average increase this year to 1%. The Republican governor acknowledged in a signing statement that using one-time money to offset property taxes, quote, isn't good fiscal management, but he said this year's buy-down should be viewed as a bridge to broader education reforms. The Vermont House and Senate have sent a budget proposal for the next fiscal year to Governor Phil Scott, and it includes efforts to soften the blow of possible cuts to federal funding. Democrat Phil Baruth is the state Senate's president pro tem. Baruth told Vermont Edition on Tuesday that the legislature has topped off reserves of more than $100 million.
Additionally, we put in what's sometimes called a waterfall. So if we get more revenue than was predicted, $45 million of that will be put aside, and it'll be added to these other reserves. So we'll wind up with north of a couple of $100 million that can be used in an emergency.
Baruth says an example of one such emergency would be if the U.S. House's budget bill goes through and federal funding for Medicaid sees significant cuts. The Vermont Medical Society is suing to stop the Trump administration from deleting important public health and science data from government websites. At the heart of this issue is a theme common to many lawsuits filed against the administration, that the president is trying to usurp legislative authority through the use of executive orders. Jessa Barnard is executive director of VMS, a group that represents roughly 3,000 healthcare providers. She says that the administration has unconstitutionally deleted critical information from government public health websites and that the impact is being felt in Vermont.
I think it's really important as a group of clinicians caring for Vermonters that the clinicians and Vermonters have accurate, evidence-based health and public health information, and that these websites are important resources.
The lawsuit calls for the restoration of the deleted sites and prohibits the removal of any additional information. And Vermont's Agency of Transportation is reminding drivers and passengers to buckle up every time they're on the road. The state has joined law enforcement agencies across America for the nationwide Buckle Up campaign, which kicked off earlier this week. The campaign includes events aimed at reinforcing the safety advantages of wearing a seatbelt. It began as Click It or Ticket in 1993. Vermont began participating in 2002. AOT notes that Vermont has an 88.4% seatbelt use rate, which hovers around the national average. The campaign ends on June 1st, but agency leaders encourage using your seatbelt every single time you're in the car. Coming up, members of Odanak First Nation Reserve in Quebec use food to preserve their knowledge, culture, and homelands. That's after this. Earlier this month, people gathered at the Odanak First Nation Reserve in Quebec for a home-cooked meal. The event offered a taste of foods harvested on Abenaki territory, and it was part of ongoing efforts by Odanak and Woollynak First Nations to preserve their knowledge, culture, and homelands. Vermont Public's Elodie Reed visited as Abenaki citizens prepared some traditional as well as some experimental dishes.
It's around 10 a.m. on the first Saturday in May. Behind the Odanak Community Hall, a fire is already crackling. It's hot and ready to cook the Canada goose that's currently laying across the lap of Yves Landry.
This one I'm gonna plonk it and cook it over the fire, like a traditional way.
Yves is a 72-year-old Abenaki citizen of Woollynak First Nation. That reserve is located about a 45-minute drive northeast of the Odanak Reserve along the St. Lawrence River. And it's the area where Yves, his son, and some other folks went geese hunting this spring.
So we got some 60 or something like that, yeah.
Yves has been hunting geese since he was young. But he says the places he used to go with his dad and uncles, a couple lakes just outside of the Woollynak Reserve, are no longer accessible. The Quebec government put the lakes inside an ecological zone in the 90s.
We didn't consult the Abenaki in Woollynak.
In Canada and the United States, colonial governments have dispossessed land from Indigenous peoples, forced cultural assimilation on those communities, and dramatically changed the environment around them. Today, the reserves for Odanak and Woollynak First Nations add up to a combined 2.5 square miles. But the First Nations say they haven't ceded their territory or Indakina in Quebec and New England. And they're working to regain access to what they can, including those 2 lakes where Yves Landry grew up hunting geese.
We're trying to be the steward of the place so we could go back and do our activities, but within mind protecting what is supposed to be protected.
Odanak and Woollynak First Nations are also increasingly trying to teach Abenaki citizens how to hunt, fish, and trap, and gather plants on their territory, and to prepare and eat those foods through an annual community banquet. From there, the younger generations might be able to carry their culture forward. Like 25-year-old Isaac LaChapelle Gill and his 27-year-old cousin, Seguanis LaChapelle. They're both citizens of Odanak First Nation. And today, for the banquet, they're making a mainstay of many North American indigenous nations, the bread bannock.
The recipe is easy to steal. It's water and... Hey!
Isaac is the main organizer of the banquet project, and he has a lot of help from Seguanis.
So the project's name is Olepaguat. So Olepaguat means it tastes good or it has good taste.
A lot of people maybe haven't tried out muskrat or beaver, or they haven't tried it out in a long time. So they want to taste it again. Maybe they'll get the interest to go trap it for themselves, or at least be involved more in some of the community gatherings that happen.
Though Seguanis and Isaac say they don't want to put too much pressure on themselves or fellow Abenaki citizens.
Because it builds a lot of stress, saying I need to learn every single thing there is so that like the culture doesn't die. But it's just one, like you need to put one foot in front of the other.
But the point of the project is trying the recipes.
Such as a lemonade made from sumac flowers. Isaac puts the crimson cones in a pot of boiling water. He dips in a spoon several minutes later.
It's actually kind of good.
And he's pleasantly surprised by the taste.
So this is done, technically?
For Vermont Public, I'm Elodie Reed.
Thanks for listening to The Frequency today. We had additional reporting from Lola Dufour, Michaela Lafrac, Jen Jarecki, and Bob Kinzel. Today's episode was produced by me, Liam Elder Connors, and edited by Mark Davis. Our music is by Blue Dot Sessions. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from Vermont.
Planet Money helps you understand the economy. We find the people at the center of the story.
Garbage in New York, that was like a controlled substance.
We show you how money influences everything.
Tell me what you like by telling me how you spend your money.
And we dig until we get answers.
I had a bad feeling you're going to bring that up.
Planet Money finds out. All you have to do is listen. The Planet Money Podcast from NPR.